This episode is brought to you by Ring cameras and doorbells. A lot happens while you're away from home. That's why Ring makes it easy to check in from anywhere. Whether you're saying hi to an unexpected guest, making sure those packages are safe, or keeping your pets company while you're out grabbing groceries. It's all a few taps away, right from your phone. Be there with Ring. Explore cameras, doorbells, alarm kits, and more right now at ring.com.
Looking to invest? Start your journey by exploring exchange-traded funds with Global X ETFs. Exchange-traded funds, or ETFs for short, create baskets of stocks, bonds, and other assets that you can buy in a single trade. Global X specializes in ETFs that track emerging trends, like the rise of artificial intelligence, as well as strategies aimed to generate income potential. Visit globalxetfs.com to discover how you can get started.
Thanks for listening to the Red Treehouse, where I tell scary stories to keep you up at night. You can listen to the Red Treehouse on your favorite streaming platforms, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Be sure to follow, like, and subscribe. Oh, and leave a 5-star review. You can follow the Red Treehouse on social media, on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, X, Threads, and Facebook at Red Treehouse Pod. And now you can find the Red Treehouse on Patreon. Join the Red Treehouse community for as little as $3 a month and receive exclusive member benefits, including personal shoutouts, early access to episodes, bonus episodes, and more. Simply go to patreon.com/Red Treehouse. And as always, if you have a scary story or topic you'd like me to feature on an upcoming episode, email redtreehousepod@gmail.com. Sources for this episode can be found in the show notes. Content warning. This episode contains descriptions about violence against children and murder. Listener discretion is advised. Of all the scary things in the world that spook me, urban legends are near the top of the list. I think it's because they occupy the space between fiction and reality, and leave just enough room for the possibility they can be true. As a kid, and even as an adult, I refused to play Bloody Mary. As a teenager readying to drive, I often thought about the killer in the back seat. And, while trying to fall asleep, I make sure to keep my entire body on the mattress and under the covers to avoid having my hand licked. The list of urban legends is nearly endless, with enough entries to scare you senseless. Recently, though, while doing some research for potential future episodes, I came across an urban legend that scared the hell out of me. In the 1970s, Staten Island, New York was terrorized by stories of a suspected serial killer, Cropsey, who'd escaped from a mental hospital and kidnapped and killed several children. Adding to the horror was a unique physical feature of the supposed killer, a hook for a hand. Like a game of telephone, the stories grew more outlandish as it spread across the area. At times, Cropsey had a disfigured face. At other times, he struck outside Staten Island and committed horrific crimes across New York State. And, much like we discovered in the Boogeyman episode, parents were all too eager to leverage the urban legend to keep their kids in line. But what scares me about this urban legend, maybe more than any other, is that it's true. In this episode of the Red Treehouse, we're going to explore the legitimately scary and real-life urban legend, Cropsey. Who was the real-life Cropsey? And how would you react to the news that a supposed urban legend turned out to be a real-life nightmare. I'll share the story. You decide for yourself. I'm your host, Will. Welcome to the Red Treehouse. What's fascinating about Cropsey is it began as a variation on the man with a hook for a hand, an urban legend that started in the 1950s. Easily one of the most well-known urban legends, the man with a hook for a hand has variations in the details. The basic story goes like this. One night, a couple drives out to a secluded area to spend intimate time together. After parking, and while listening to the radio, a breaking news story suddenly interrupts the music. A serial killer has escaped from a nearby mental health hospital, and he's sporting a hook for a hand. After realizing the mental health hospital is within a short walk of where they parked, the woman requests they leave immediately and head back towards civilization. The man agrees, but as he starts the car, he hears a scraping sound somewhere on the vehicle. Panicked, he throws the car into drive and quickly gets out of there, not stopping until he arrives at the woman's house. As the adrenaline rush begins to wear off and breathing returns to normal, they exit the car, only to find the killer's hook hanging from the car door. Variations to the legend include the couple spotting the killer on the car's roof and narrowly escaping. Another version has the woman spotting a figure standing in the shadows and the man leaving to confront the figure. When he gets to the spot, the figure is gone, and thinking his girlfriend was seeing things, he returns to the vehicle, only to find his girlfriend murdered with a hook. And in perhaps the most disturbing version of the story, the couple are driving through country back roads when they stop so the man can urinate in the woods. While he is gone, the woman hears the breaking news report about the escaped serial killer. When her boyfriend doesn't return within a few minutes, she grows scared, especially when she begins hearing a thumping on the roof of the car. Eventually, she exits the vehicle and makes a run for it, and after a few seconds, turns back to see the escaped criminal sitting on the roof of the car, hook in one hand, and her boyfriend's severed head in the other. The killer was thumping the head on the roof over and over. Urban legends have only grown in popularity over the years, with the internet sparking renewed interest in well-known legends, and sparking creativity in coming up with new ones. In most cases, an urban legend functions much like the Boogeyman, as a sort of cautionary tale to wayward kids about rebellious behavior, or as a scary Aesop's fable, where the story is moralized to teach a lesson. In the 1970s in Staten Island, New York, the legend of Cropsey began circulating through different neighborhoods. At the time, Staten Island was less developed than the 4 other boroughs, despite having a population of over 300,000 people. Much of the island was covered in thick woods, tidal wetlands, and dense marshes, and Fresh Kills landfill, which covered over 2,200 acres on the western side of the island. The topography of Staten Island is important because it contributed to the scare factor of the Cropsey legend, and later, when Cropsey turned out to be real. The connection between Cropsey and the man with the hook for a hand is easy to make. According to the legend of Cropsey, he was a man who escaped a mental health hospital after the death of his son. He had a hook for a hand, and he kidnapped young children as a type of revenge for his own tragic loss. One article stated, quote, "The tales of Cropsey's origin are a bit debated, but they begin with a family tragedy. In short, a father loses his whole family, or at least his child, while on the shores of a small summer cottage near Maschine Lake, which was also near a summer camp. After the death of his family, George Cropsey, a once respected businessman, goes insane." End quote. The article goes on to describe how the death of Cropsey's child came about, the irresponsibility of a camper or staff member causing a deadly fire. Out of grief, Cropsey disappeared for a time, only to reappear and take his revenge. Campers and staff are threatened, hurt, and in some cases, murdered. Police are called, but Cropsey disappears into the thick woods, evading capture. Even now, campers have reported hearing voices, seeing threatening symbols, and catching glimpses of Cropsey through the dense foliage of the forest. To this point, I've mentioned the topography in large part because it's essential to the Cropsey legend. Scattered throughout the woods, though, are the ruins of several old buildings, known as the Staten Island Farm Colony. One article described the buildings as, quote, "once a poorhouse or a place to house and help the needy in exchange for work," end quote. The farm colony permanently closed in 1975, and though there is a no trespassing sign on the fence surrounding the property, pictures show plenty of trespassing over the years. In fact, the interior of the buildings is covered in graffiti. The farm colony is part of Cropsey lore, with one article stating the buildings, quote, "have been used for everything from their intended purposes to satanic sacrifice and the burial of local children," end quote. Adjacent to the farm colony was the Willowbrook State School. At the time of its opening in 1948, it was, quote, "the largest institution in the world for the treatment of people with developmental disabilities, separating them from the mainstream of society," end quote. However, within 25 years, the school had been exposed for the inhumane treatment of its residents. One article described the truth of Willowbrook. Quote, "In truth, it was a warehouse for adults and children with mental or physical disabilities, committed by parents who either didn't want them or didn't know how to care for them," end quote. For many children, growing up in the shadow of Willowbrook included a genuine fear of Cropsey. Parents would caution their children to follow the rules, lest they be sent to Willowbrook, where Cropsey would get them. But how? Well, beneath Willowbrook were a series of tunnels where human experiments and satanic rituals were rumored to take place. But truly, all of this is just an urban legend, right? On July 9th, 1987, Jennifer Schweiger, a 12-year-old girl with Down syndrome, left her home to go for a walk. when she didn't come back home, her family reported her missing. An extensive search was conducted throughout Staten Island, and on August 12, 1987, 35 days after Jennifer disappeared, her body was discovered in a shallow grave in a wooded area near Willowbrook State School. According to one article, quote, "A particular spot caught the eye of retired New York City firefighter George Kramer. He returned with the police, and the entire body was unearthed from the shallow grave, and the remains were positively identified as those of Schweiger." End quote. Having discovered Jennifer Schweiger's body, police began searching for the perpetrator. Less than 200 yards from Jennifer's body was a makeshift campsite, also on the grounds of the Willowbrook State School. Eyewitnesses came forward and told police they'd seen Jennifer, quote, "walking alongside a homeless man with a bicycle," end quote. The homeless man was identified as Andre Rand, a custodian at Willowbrook State School. Rand, whose birth name was Frank Rashan, was a sex offender who had a criminal history. In 1979, Rand was accused of raping a young woman and a 15-year-old girl. However, charges were never filed against him. In 1983, while driving a school bus, Rand picked up 11 children from a local YMCA, purchased a meal for them, and drove them to Newark Liberty International Airport, all without parental consent. Because of this, he was arrested, charged with, and convicted of unlawful imprisonment. He spent 10 months in prison. In 1988, Rand was charged with the kidnapping and first-degree murder of Jennifer Schweiger. However, after deliberating, the jury was unable to reach a verdict on the murder charge, despite convicting him on the kidnapping charge. As a result, Rand was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison, with parole eligibility in 2008. As if the kidnapping and murder of Jennifer Schweiger weren't enough, Andre Rand was the primary suspect in several other disappearances in Staten Island. It's important to note that while he is the primary suspect in multiple cases, he has only been charged in one additional case. The disappearances include 5-year-old Alice Perea, who's been missing since July 7th, 1972. 18-year-old Audrey Lynn Nerenberg, who has been missing since July 5th, 1977. 42-year-old Ethel Louise Atwell, who has been missing since October 24th, 1978. 44-year-old Shin Lee, who has been missing since July 20th, 1978. 11-year-old Thais Jackson, who has been missing since August 14th, 1983, and 22-year-old Hank Gaforio, who has been missing since June 9th, 1984. On July 15th, 1981, 7-year-old Holly Ann Hughes disappeared after being sent to a local deli, 2 blocks from her home. Though she was seen making a purchase at approximately 9:30 p.m., Holly never returned home. A frantic search ensued for the young child, but Holly was never seen or heard from again. A month later, Holly's mother, Holly Cederholm, quote, received a phone call from a man who identified himself as Sal. Sal informed Cederholm that he was imprisoning the child and asked that they meet so that Cederholm could engage in sex acts for the camera in exchange for Holly's safe return. End quote. Holly's mother agreed to the meetup, and she traveled to meet Sal at Penn Station in Midtown Manhattan. However, Sal never showed up. From this point, the case stalled until 2002, when police searched the yard of Andre Rand's former home. Though they did not find evidence, eyewitnesses claimed to have seen Rand's vehicle circling the deli at the time of Holly's disappearance in 1981. Holly's mother reported the voice she heard on the phone call belonged to Andre Rand. And several others claimed to have seen Holly inside Rand's car on the night of her disappearance. Here's the twist. Authorities interviewed Rand in 1981, shortly after Holly disappeared, and they conducted a search of his vehicle. Presumably, they found no evidence tying him to the disappearance. But in 2002, authorities re-interviewed Andre Rand, and he acknowledged, quote, playing hide-and-seek with Holly on the day she vanished, and gave her money to buy soap because she was filthy. But he claims to have left her before she vanished, end quote. Shortly after, Rand was charged with the kidnapping of Holly Hughes, and in October 2004, he was convicted and sentenced to an additional 25 years to life in prison, with parole eligibility in 2037, when he will be 93 years old. Andre Rand, the real-life, flesh and blood, Cropsey, was both a pedophile and possible serial killer. Something interesting. I was born in Brooklyn in the mid-'80s and lived there until the late 90s, and I don't remember ever hearing about this case. It's scary to think these kinds of atrocities happen right where we live, and while we're doing ordinary life tasks. Jennifer Schweiger simply went for a walk. Holly Hughes went to a deli 2 blocks away from her home. And along the way, they met Andre Rand, the real-life Cropsey. Though I find urban legends fascinating and scary, I'd much prefer they stay fiction. Because truly, no matter how terrifying a story is, nothing is scarier than a human monster. If you're interested in going deeper into the Cropsey urban legend and the case of Andre Rand, a 2009 documentary titled Cropsey offers a thorough and fascinating deep dive. As we close this episode of the Red Treehouse, we're left with this question. How would you react to the news that a supposed urban legend turned out to be a real-life nightmare? I've shared the story. Now you decide for yourself. I'm your host, Will. Thanks for joining me in the Red Treehouse.